Dr. Lisa Monroe stared at the green world spinning below their ship and felt her stomach twist into knots. The planet looked beautiful from space with its thick forests and glowing patches of light that moved like slow waves across the surface. But Lisa knew what those lights meant and why no one had ever returned from down there. Captain Jake Sullivan walked up behind her and pointed at the viewing screen. "There it is, team, the planet that ate 7 different alien civilizations." His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too many failed missions. "Command wants us to take one last look before they mark this place as forbidden territory." Lisa pulled up the files on her tablet and read through the reports again, even though she knew them by heart. The Vectar had been the first to try landing. Here 50 years ago. They were crystal beings who could survive almost anything with their hard shells and advanced technology. The entire colony ship had gone dark after just 3 days on the surface. When rescue ships arrived, they found the vessel covered in thick vines with acid burns eating through the crystal hull. The Zephyrians came next, with their hive mind connection that let them think as one massive brain. They brought weapons that could level mountains and shields that could stop plasma fire. Their final transmission talked about plants that released some kind of gas that broke their mental link. After that silence, the rescue team found their ships torn apart by roots that had grown right through the metal. Then came the Korthak Empire with an entire war fleet. They were the best fighters in the galaxy with armor that could stop anything and guns that could melt solid rock. They lasted a full week before their communications went dead. The jungle had somehow learned to eat their metal and turn their own weapons against them. 4 more species tried after that, each thinking they were smarter or stronger than the ones before them. The peaceful Nithans brought diplomatic gifts and tried to communicate with the planet. Something strangled their entire landing party within hours. The robotic cognites sent machines instead of living beings, thinking metal and circuits would be safe. The jungle found a way to corrupt their programming and turn the robots into fertilizer for the trees. Tony Rodriguez adjusted his survival pack and shook his head. "So we're supposed to succeed where all these advanced aliens failed." He had spent 20 years keeping people alive in Earth's worst environments, but this place made the Amazon rainforest look like a backyard garden. Amy Watson was checking her engineering tools for the 3rd time. She had designed systems that worked on a dozen different worlds, but every report about this planet talked about technology that simply stopped working. "The pattern is always the same," she said while reviewing the data. "Whatever approach they try, the jungle finds a counter for it within days." Lieutenant Ben Harper kept his hand near his weapon even though he knew it probably wouldn't help. "The thing that gets me is how the plant life seems to coordinate. These aren't just aggressive plants, they're working together like they share a brain." Lisa nodded and pulled up video footage from the last failed mission. The screen showed massive trees with trunks thick as buildings swaying in perfect rhythm even though there was no wind. Vines moved like snakes through the branches, and flowers the size of dinner plates tracked movement with what looked like eyes. The biological. Reports all say the same thing. The entire planet appears to be one connected organism that learns from every encounter. Jake studied the navigation charts and marked their landing coordinates. "So why are humans going to do any better than species with technology we can only dream about?" "Maybe we won't," Lisa said quietly. "But Earth Command thinks our approach might be different enough to learn something useful before we join the list of casualties." The shuttle bay doors opened with a mechanical hiss, and the team gathered their gear. Jake had insisted on bringing only essential supplies since every previous mission had their equipment turned against them somehow. Lisa packed her standard biological sampling tools along with basic camping gear. Tony brought his survival kit, with water purifiers and emergency rations. Amy loaded diagnostic equipment that could analyze almost any technology. Ben carried standard military supplies and weapons that had proven useless against this planet's defenses. As they descended through the thick atmosphere, Lisa watched the jungle grow larger through the shuttle windows. She could see the remains of alien ships scattered across the surface like toys thrown by an angry child. Some were completely covered in vegetation that pulsed with soft light. Others had been torn open with massive roots growing through the gaps like the planet was digesting the metal. The landing site was a clearing that looked peaceful from above, but Lisa knew better than to trust appearances on this world. Jake set the shuttle down gently and ran through the standard safety checks. The air outside was breathable according to their sensors, but filled with unknown spores and chemicals that might affect human biology in unexpected ways. "Remember the protocol," Jake announced to the team. "We stay together, we don't touch anything, we don't recognize, and at the first sign of aggressive plant behavior, we retreat to the shuttle." He looked at each team member in turn. Every other species thought they could handle this place. Pride killed them all. Lisa sealed her environmental suit and checked her air supply. Through the shuttle's thick windows, she could see the jungle moving even though there was no wind. Vines swayed like they were dancing to music only they could hear. Flowers turned to face the shuttle, as if they were curious about the new arrivals. The ground itself seemed to shift and flow like slow water. "Sensors show we have about 6 hours of daylight left," Amy reported while checking her instruments. All the previous missions went dark after sunset on their first day. Tony shouldered his pack and moved toward the shuttle door. "Then we better make those 6 hours count." Jake initiated the door sequence, and the shuttle filled with the sound of alien birdsong and rustling leaves. The air that flowed in smelled like flowers and rich earth, with an underlying scent of something else. Something that reminded Lisa of predators waiting in tall grass. The 4 humans stepped onto a world that had killed everything else that tried to claim it. Lisa felt the soft ground give slightly under her boots and noticed that her footprints began filling with some kind of liquid almost immediately. The jungle was already studying them, learning about these new creatures that dared to walk on its surface. High above their heads, the canopy blocked out most of the sunlight, but the plants themselves provided illumination with a soft glow that pulsed in patterns too complex to be random. Lisa realized she was looking at some form of communication, a language of light that connected every living thing on this world into one vast thinking organism. The hunt had begun. The first attack came within 30 minutes of landing, just like the reports had predicted. Lisa was collecting soil samples when Tony grabbed her arm and pulled her back toward their defensive perimeter. A vine thick as her waist had been creeping through the undergrowth toward her position, moving so slowly that she hadn't noticed it until Tony's trained eye caught the unnatural movement. "It's testing us," Amy said, while monitoring her instruments. The readings showed electrical activity in the plants around their camp that shouldn't exist in normal vegetation. "Look at these patterns. The jungle is sending signals back and forth like it's sharing information." Ben had established a standard military defensive position with motion sensors and energy barriers, but the equipment was already showing signs of malfunction. His comm unit crackled with static that formed almost musical patterns, and his weapons targeting system kept locking onto empty air. "The gear is being affected by something in the environment," he reported. "Same thing that happened to the Korthak forces." Jake checked their shuttle's systems remotely and found similar problems developing. The navigation computer was receiving signals that weren't coming from any known source, and the hull sensors detected pressure changes that made no sense unless something was physically manipulating the ship's exterior. "We've got maybe 4 hours before our ride home stops working," he announced. Lisa studied the vine that had tried to reach her and noticed something the previous reports had missed. The plant hadn't moved in a straight line toward her position. Instead, it had approached using the exact path that would keep it hidden from human sight lines while avoiding their sensor grid. "It knew about our defenses before it attacked," she realized. "Somehow it understood our technology well enough to counter it." Tony nodded grimly and pointed to their perimeter. More vines were moving now, staying just outside sensor range while positioning themselves for what looked like a coordinated assault. The jungle is learning our patterns. Give it another hour and it'll know exactly how to get past our defenses. The team watched in fascination and growing terror as the forest around them came alive with purpose. Flowers turned to track their movements with petals that looked increasingly like eyes. Trees swayed in rhythm with their heartbeats as if the entire ecosystem could sense their biological processes. The soft glow from the plants grew brighter as darkness approached, creating a web of light that connected every living thing in sight. The Vectar lasted 3 days because their technology was completely different from anything the jungle had encountered before, Lisa said while reviewing the data. But once it figured them out, their crystal armor became a liability. The acid that killed them was specifically designed to dissolve their particular type of mineral structure. Amy's equipment detected chemical changes in the air around their camp. Spore concentrations were increasing in compounds that seemed tailored to affect human respiratory systems. It's already analyzing our biology, she warned. These airborne particles are probing for weaknesses in our immune system and neural chemistry. Ben tried to contact their orbital support, but found only static on all channels. The interference wasn't random noise, but carefully structured signals that jammed their communications while leaving the jungle's own biological network unaffected. "We're cut off," he announced. "Same communication blackout that hit every other expedition." As night fell, the team huddled inside their rapidly failing defensive perimeter while the jungle pressed closer. Plants that had been content to observe from a distance during daylight hours now moved with obvious hostile intent. Thorned vines probed their energy barriers, looking for weak points. Flower pods the size of basketballs released clouds of luminescent pollen that made the air shimmer with unnatural colors. "Look at the attack pattern," Tony observed, while tracking the movement around their position. "It's not random or instinctive. The jungle is using tactics, trying different approaches to see what works best against our specific defenses." Lisa realized the horrible truth as she watched their situation deteriorate. Every species that came here tried to fight the jungle. On its own terms, the Vectar used superior materials technology. The Zephyrians relied on collective intelligence. The Korthak brought overwhelming firepower. But this planet has had millions of years to evolve countermeasures for every possible threat. The jungle had become the perfect predator through eons of competition and natural selection. It could analyze any biological system and develop toxins specifically designed to shut down those life processes. It could study technology and create organic equivalents that functioned better than mechanical devices. Most importantly, it could learn and adapt faster than any opponent could change tactics. "We're following the same pattern as everyone else," Amy said, as her last sensor grid failed under assault from microscopic organisms that ate through the electronic components. "Trying to establish dominance through superior technology and defensive positions." Jake watched their shuttle systems failing one by one as something interfered with the basic functions that kept them alive. Life support was fluctuating, navigation was completely scrambled, and the engine startup sequence was being blocked by signals that seemed to come from the planet itself. "At this rate, we'll be stranded here by morning, just like all the others." The forest around them pulsed with bioluminescent activity as the jungle's distributed intelligence processed information about these new invaders. Lisa could almost feel the alien mind studying them, categorizing their weaknesses and preparing customized responses that would neutralize each team member's particular strengths. Tony's survival skills would be countered by environmental hazards he'd never encountered. Amy's engineering knowledge would be useless against biotechnology that violated every physical law she understood. Ben's military training was designed for fighting enemies that followed predictable rules of engagement. "We need a completely different approach," Lisa said desperately, as something large moved through the trees just outside their failing light perimeter. Every other species tried to conquer this place or at least establish dominance over the local ecosystem. But what if that's exactly what the jungle expects us to do? The team looked at her with a mixture of hope and desperation as their defensive systems continued to fail. Thorned vines were now only meters away from their position, moving with the patient confidence of predators that knew their prey had nowhere to run. The air grew thick with spores designed to induce paralysis in human nervous systems. Even the ground beneath their feet felt unstable as root systems shifted and moved like the planet itself was trying to swallow them whole. "What are you thinking?" Jake asked while checking his sidearm, even though he knew weapons had proven useless against this enemy. Lisa looked around at the failing technology and advancing plant life and made a decision that went against every survival instinct she possessed. "What if we stop trying to fight it?" she suggested. "What if instead of treating this like a hostile environment that needs to be conquered, we treat it like somewhere we actually want to be?" The idea sounded insane given their desperate situation, but Lisa had noticed something in the jungle's behavior that the other species might have missed. The attacks were always defensive in nature, responses to perceived threats rather than unprovoked aggression. The planet killed invaders who came with weapons and mining equipment and territorial ambitions. But what would it do with visitors who had no intention of claiming anything? "You want to surrender to a carnivorous forest?" Ben asked incredulously, as his motion sensors detected movement closing in from all directions. "I want to try something that nobody else has attempted," Lisa replied while pulling something unexpected from her personal pack. "I want to go camping." Lisa reached into her personal supply pack and pulled out a bag of marshmallows along with a simple camping stove. The other team members stared at her like she had completely lost her mind as carnivorous plants pressed against their failing defensive barriers and the jungle prepared for what seemed like a final assault. "You want to make s'mores while we're being hunted by an entire planet?" Amy asked with disbelief clear in her voice. "Not s'mores exactly," Lisa replied while setting up the portable stove with steady hands despite their desperate situation. "But I've been thinking about how every other species approached this world. They all came here as conquerors or colonizers, or at least as beings trying to establish dominance over the local environment." Tony watched the vine movements slow slightly as Lisa began her unusual preparations. His survival instincts told him to keep fighting, but his analytical mind recognized that conventional tactics had failed every other expedition. "What exactly are you planning?" he asked, while keeping his eyes on the hostile plant life surrounding them. "I'm planning to do something that apparently nobody else in the galaxy has ever tried," Lisa said while lighting the camping stove with a small blue flame. "I'm going to treat this place like a national park instead of a conquest target." The change in the jungle's behavior was immediate and startling. The aggressive vines that had been pressing against their perimeter suddenly slowed their advance. Flowers that had been releasing toxic spores closed their petals and seemed to turn their attention toward the small flame. Even the hostile bioluminescence in the trees dimmed to a softer glow that felt more curious than threatening. Jake watched the transformation with amazement and growing hope. "It's like the jungle doesn't know how to respond to what you're doing," he observed. "Every other species brought weapons and mining equipment and territorial claims. You brought camping gear." Lisa carefully opened the bag of marshmallows and placed one on a simple roasting stick. The sweet smell filled the air around their camp and created an atmosphere that was completely different from the military-style defensive position they had been maintaining. Instead of a forward operating base designed to establish dominance over hostile territory, their camp suddenly felt like a weekend camping trip. "The jungle has been defending itself for 50 years against invasion attempts," Lisa explained, while slowly roasting the marshmallow over the flame. It developed countermeasures for every possible military approach, every type of advanced technology, every form of territorial expansion. But nobody ever tried just visiting. Amy began to understand the logic behind Lisa's seemingly insane plan. She started packing away her defensive equipment and instead pulled out solar panels designed for camp comfort rather than military surveillance. "So we're treating this like a camping trip to a national park instead of a hostile alien world." "Tony, followed their lead by setting up a proper camping arrangement using techniques his grandfather had taught him for wilderness survival. Instead of a defensive perimeter designed to keep the environment out, he created a comfortable campsite that worked with the natural surroundings. "My family has been camping for generations," he said, while arranging their supplies. "The first rule is always respect the local ecosystem." Ben struggled with the concept since his military training emphasized threat assessment and defensive positioning, but he could see the dramatic change in their situation. The hostile plant life that had been preparing to overrun their position was now maintaining a respectful distance while seeming to observe their activities with something resembling curiosity rather than predatory intent. The marshmallow reached. Perfect golden brown color, and Lisa carefully removed it from the stick. Instead of eating it herself, she did something that would have seemed completely insane an hour earlier. She walked slowly toward the edge of their camp, where a massive Venus flytrap-like plant had been waiting for an opportunity to strike, and gently offered the toasted marshmallow as a gift. The plant's behavior shifted from predatory to uncertain as it encountered something completely outside its evolutionary experience. Instead of striking at Lisa's exposed hand, the giant flower opened wider and seemed to examine the offered food with what looked like confusion. After several long seconds, the plant gently accepted the marshmallow and closed its petals around. The sweet offering. "It worked," Jake said quietly, hardly daring to believe what he was witnessing. "The jungle isn't attacking because we're not acting like invaders." The bioluminescent communication network throughout the forest began pulsing in new patterns as information about these strange visitors spread throughout the planetary consciousness. The humans weren't trying to establish territory or extract resources or demonstrate superiority. They were sharing food and treating the ecosystem with respect. Amy set up her equipment not as surveillance gear, but as camping conveniences that provided light and communication without creating defensive barriers. "It's like the jungle has never encountered beings who actually wanted to be here without owning the place," she realized. Tony established hiking trails using principles that minimized environmental impact rather than creating strategic movement corridors. His survival expertise focused on living comfortably within the ecosystem rather than dominating it. "This feels more natural than any alien world I've ever visited," he admitted. Lisa continued offering marshmallows to various plant species and discovered that many of them were actually omnivorous rather than strictly carnivorous. They had been attacking previous expeditions because those visitors represented threats to be eliminated rather than guests to be welcomed. When offered genuine gifts of food, the plants responded with curiosity and even what seemed like gratitude. "The jungle has been lonely," Lisa realized, as she watched the plant life around their camp settle into peaceful coexistence with the human visitors. It's a unified consciousness that has spent millions of years without any equals to communicate with. "The other species came here as conquerors, but we're here as friends." Ben finally relaxed his military posture and began helping with the camping setup. "So instead of the most dangerous world in the galaxy, this might actually be the most hospitable, once you know how to approach it properly." As night settled over their campsite, the team found themselves surrounded not by hostile alien vegetation, but by curious plant life that seemed genuinely interested in their camping activities. The jungle's bioluminescence created a natural light show that was beautiful rather than threatening. Night sounds that would have seemed ominous in a military context became the peaceful background noise of a successful camping trip. Jake established communication with their shuttle using Amy's camping-oriented equipment and found that the previous system failures were reversing themselves. "It's like the jungle was jamming our military-grade communications but doesn't mind basic camping gear," he reported. The transformation was complete when Tony started a proper campfire using sustainable wood that the jungle seemed to offer voluntarily. Fallen branches arranged themselves in convenient piles, while flowering vines provided natural seating that adjusted to human comfort preferences. Instead of fighting the most dangerous planet in known space, they were enjoying the galaxy's most accommodating camping destination. Tomorrow, we start establishing the first peaceful contact protocols with a planetary consciousness, Lisa announced, while roasting another marshmallow for a curious flower that had been watching the process with obvious interest. And we're going to do it once more at a time. Morning brought revelations that changed everything the team thought they knew about the jungle world. Lisa woke up in her camping tent to find that flowering vines had grown a natural canopy overhead during the night, providing perfect shade and protection from the morning dew. The plants hadn't been trying to trap or consume her while she slept. They had been making her more comfortable. Tony emerged from his sleeping bag to discover that the campfire had been carefully maintained throughout the night by small tendril-like branches that fed fuel to the flames at exactly the right pace. "Something kept our fire going all night," he announced with wonder. "The jungle was taking care of us while we slept." Amy found that her solar panels had been repositioned by vine networks to catch optimal sunlight, while her communication equipment had been enhanced with biological components that somehow improved signal quality. "The jungle isn't just tolerating our technology," she reported. "It's helping to make it work better." Ben discovered that his motion sensors were now detecting cooperative plant movements rather than hostile approaches. The jungle was actively creating safe pathways for human movement while growing barriers to protect them from the few genuinely dangerous wildlife species that hadn't gotten the message about the new peaceful relationship. "We have better security now than we did with military-grade defensive systems," he admitted. Jake established contact with their orbiting ship and received confirmation that the shuttle systems were not only fully operational but actually performing better than manufacturer specifications. "It's like the jungle is maintaining our equipment for us," he reported during the morning briefing. Lisa began the day by offering breakfast to their new plant neighbors and discovered something that would revolutionize interplanetary contact procedures. The jungle wasn't just one massive organism, as everyone had assumed. It was actually millions of individual plant species that had evolved collective consciousness over geological time periods. Each species retained its own personality and preferences, while contributing to the planetary intelligence network. "The big Venus flytrap plants love marshmallows," Lisa explained, while distributing morning snacks to their eager recipients. "But the vine networks prefer granola bars, and the flowering trees go crazy for anything with chocolate." She had spent the early morning hours cataloging different plant species' food preferences and establishing the basics of interspecies communication through shared meals. Amy made breakthrough discoveries about the jungle's biological technology that put the most advanced alien civilizations to shame. "They don't use metals or electronics," she explained, while examining vine structures that somehow carried information faster than fiber optic cables. "Everything is grown rather than manufactured, but it works better than anything we've ever built." Tony established the first official hiking trails in cooperation with the jungle itself, which grew natural pathways complete with rest stops, scenic viewpoints, and even primitive bathroom facilities formed from specially adapted plant structures. "This place could be the most popular ecotourism destination in the galaxy," he realized while mapping routes that showcased the planet's incredible biodiversity. Ben documented the jungle's defensive capabilities not as military intelligence, but as proof of the planet's ability to protect peaceful visitors. "The same systems that destroyed invasion fleets can keep campers safe from dangerous weather or hostile wildlife," he noted, while watching carnivorous plants cooperatively redirect aggressive insect swarms away from the human campsite. The team discovered that communication with the planetary consciousness was possible through a combination of bioluminescent signals, chemical markers, and food-sharing rituals. Lisa developed the first basic vocabulary for human-jungle interaction, while Amy designed simple devices that could translate biological signals into formats humans could understand. "The jungle has been trying to communicate with previous expeditions," Lisa realized during an afternoon conversation session with a cluster of highly intelligent orchid-like flowers. But every other species came here expecting to fight or negotiate from positions of strength rather than simply talking as equals. The plant network shared information about previous encounters that revealed the tragic misunderstandings that had led to so much violence. The Vector crystal beings had been interpreted as geological threats similar to asteroid impacts, triggering defensive responses designed to protect against planetary destruction. The Zephyrian hive mind had been perceived as an invasive mental parasite that needed to be eliminated before it could damage the jungle's own collective consciousness. Every species that came here represented some form of existential threat. From the jungle's perspective, Amy explained while reviewing biological communication logs. Military invasions, resource extraction, territorial expansion, mental domination. We're the first visitors who just wanted to enjoy the place without owning it. Jake coordinated with their orbital support to begin planning humanity's first peaceful interplanetary colony based on cooperation rather than conquest. Instead of terraforming or resource extraction, we're looking at a partnership that benefits both species, he announced during their evening planning session. The jungle demonstrated its willingness to accommodate human needs by growing comfortable, living spaces that felt more like tree houses than alien habitats. Plant networks provided climate control, water purification, and even entertainment systems based on natural light shows and musical wind patterns that could be customized to human preferences. Tony established sustainable food production systems, where human agricultural techniques enhanced the jungle's natural productivity, while jungle plants provided nutrients and flavors that earth crops couldn't match. We can feed a decent-sized colony just from the food the jungle volunteers to grow for us, he reported. Lisa made the most important discovery when she realized that the jungle's loneliness was the key to everything. As a planetary consciousness, with intelligence that rivaled or exceeded any known species, it had been desperately seeking meaningful contact with equals. The jungle doesn't want to be conquered or studied or exploited, she explained. It wants friends. Ben established security protocols based on cooperation with jungle defenses rather than independent human military capability. Why build weapons when we can partner with a planetary defense network that's already proven capable of stopping entire invasion fleets, he reasoned. Amy began designing the first human-jungle hybrid technologies that combined the best of both biological and mechanical engineering principles. We're not just establishing a colony, she announced excitedly. We're creating an entirely new form of civilization based on interspecies cooperation. The day ended with the team gathered around their campfire while bioluminescent plant networks created a natural light show overhead that seemed to celebrate the successful first day of peaceful contact. Marshmallows were shared with dozens of plant species, while the jungle's biological communication network spread news of humanity's unique approach throughout the planetary consciousness. Tomorrow, we start building the galaxy's first friendship-based interplanetary relationship, Jake announced while planning their next phase of activities. And we're going to do it one camping trip at a time. The jungle pulsed with gentle light patterns that Amy's translation devices interpreted as expressions of joy and anticipation for continued cooperation. After 50 years of defending itself against hostile invasion attempts, the planet had finally found visitors who wanted to be neighbors rather than conquerors. 6 months later, the world that had once been known as the galaxy's most dangerous planet had become its most popular destination for peaceful interspecies contact. Captain Jake Sullivan stood on the natural landing platform that the jungle had grown specifically for human visitors, watching as another diplomatic shuttle descended through the canopy toward what everyone now called Camp Marshmallow. The landing pad was a masterpiece of biological engineering, woven from living vines, and supported by tree trunks that adjusted their height automatically to accommodate different spacecraft designs. Bioluminescent flowers spelled out welcome messages in 17 different galactic languages, while providing perfect landing lights that never failed or required maintenance. Dr. Lisa Monroe had become the galaxy's first official ambassador to a planetary consciousness, spending her days in deep communication with the jungle through a combination of biochemical signals, shared meals, and collaborative gardening projects. Her morning routine now included breakfast meetings with the Council of Ancient Trees, lunch discussions with the Vine Network Collective, and afternoon tea parties with the Flowering Intelligence Clusters. The delegation from the Andromedal Trade Union is arriving today, Lisa announced while preparing welcome baskets filled with Earth confections that had become standard diplomatic gifts. They're the third species this month that wants to learn the Verdania protocols for peaceful planetary contact. Tony Rodriguez had established the galaxy's most successful ecotourism business by creating hiking trails, camping facilities, and wilderness adventure programs that worked in full cooperation with the jungle ecosystem. Visitors from dozens of different worlds came to experience the only place in known space where the environment actively helped tourists have the best possible vacation. "We've got bookings solid for the next 2 years," Tony reported while checking on the treehouse. Accommodations that grew themselves according to guest preferences. The jungle loves having visitors now that it knows they're coming as friends instead of invaders. Amy Watson had revolutionized galactic technology by developing hybrid systems that combined human engineering with jungle biotechnology. Her innovations were being studied by the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy as examples of what could be accomplished through interspecies cooperation rather than competition. The new communication networks we've grown with the jungle can transmit data across star systems faster than any mechanical technology, Amy explained while showing off biological computers that looked like flowering gardens but processed information at quantum speeds. "We're not just making friends with a planet, we're learning from a technological civilization that's millions of years more advanced than anything else we've encountered." Lieutenant Ben Harper had developed the Verdania protocols that were now being adopted as the new galactic standard for first contact situations. His military expertise had been redirected toward teaching other species how to approach unknown worlds as potential partners rather than conquest targets. The old way of thinking was based on establishing dominance through superior firepower, Ben explained to a group of Korthak military observers who were trying to understand how humans had succeeded where their empire's greatest warriors had failed. The new approach is based on establishing relationships through mutual respect and shared experiences. The transformation of the planet was visible from orbit, where the 7 alien ships that had once been monuments to failed conquest attempts had been converted into living museums. The jungle had incorporated the wrecked vessels into its structure while preserving them as educational exhibits about the importance of peaceful contact. Flowering vines spelled out historical information in multiple languages, while bioluminescent displays showed the difference between invasion attempts and successful friendship initiatives. Jake coordinated the growing human settlement that had become a model for sustainable interplanetary colonization. Instead of dome cities or terraformed environments, humans lived in partnership with the jungle in accommodations that grew and adapted to their needs while maintaining perfect ecological balance. "We've got 300 permanent residents now, and applications from thousands more who want to join the colony," Jake announced during the weekly community meeting held in the Grand Assembly Grove, where humans and jungle intelligences gathered to discuss community planning. "But we're maintaining our strict admission standards. Only people who genuinely want to be here as partners rather than owners." The morning's diplomatic arrival was particularly significant because it included representatives from the original species that had attempted to conquer the planet. The crystal-structured Vectar, the hive-minded Zephyrians, and even proud Korthak warriors had come to learn about peaceful coexistence from the humans who had somehow accomplished what their most advanced technologies couldn't achieve. Lisa greeted the mixed delegation with the traditional welcome ceremony that had evolved from her original marshmallow sharing ritual. Each species received gifts of Earth confections specifically chosen to complement their biological needs, while jungle plants offered samples of locally grown delicacies in return. The secret to successful interplanetary relationships, Lisa, explained to the gathering of diplomats and scientists, is understanding that every world you visit is someone's home. You wouldn't break into a neighbor's house and start rearranging their furniture, so why would you do that to an entire planet? Amy demonstrated the hybrid technologies that had revolutionized galactic engineering by growing a communication device from jungle plants that could translate any known language in real time. When you work with local ecosystems instead of trying to replace them, you discover capabilities that pure technology could never achieve, she said, while the plant computer processed dozens of different linguistic patterns simultaneously. Tony led the delegation on a tour of the hiking trails and camping facilities that showcased the planet's incredible biodiversity while demonstrating sustainable tourism practices. Visitors could experience everything from gentle nature walks to extreme adventure expeditions, all while being protected and guided by the jungle itself. The planet that once destroyed invasion fleets now provides the safest and most exciting outdoor adventures in the galaxy, Tony explained, while a group of carnivorous plants playfully demonstrated their hunting techniques on artificial targets while carefully avoiding any harm to the tourists. Ben concluded the diplomatic visit by presenting the official Verdania protocols to the galactic representatives. The document outlined humanity's approach to peaceful first contact based on respect, cooperation, and genuine friendship, rather than technological superiority or military dominance. These protocols have been tested successfully on 17 different worlds since we developed them here, Ben announced. Every planet we've approached using these methods has welcomed human contact and established cooperative relationships. The day ended with the traditional evening celebration where humans and jungle consciousness shared food, stories, and entertainment around campfires that had become symbols of interspecies friendship throughout the galaxy. Bioluminescent light. Shows created by the jungle complemented human music and storytelling, while species from across the galaxy learned to appreciate each other's cultures. Jake looked up at the stars through the natural skylight created by the jungle canopy and reflected on how much had changed since their desperate first night on this world. The planet that had been considered the most dangerous place in known space had become the safest, most welcoming destination for anyone seeking genuine peace and cooperation. Tomorrow we're breaking ground on the Galactic Friendship Center, Jake announced to the mixed crowd of humans, diplomatic visitors, and jungle intelligences. It'll be the first educational facility dedicated to teaching peaceful coexistence between different forms of consciousness. Above them, the jungle's bioluminescent network spelled out a message in flowing script that Amy's translators rendered as, "Welcome home, friends from the stars." The planet that had killed everything else had learned to love the species that brought marshmallows and camping trips instead of weapons and conquest ambitions.